Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third session of Day 1 Leadership Workshop. In this session, we'll be discussing the Leaders Toolkit, specifically integrity, empathy, genuineness, and humility. And then please make use of the chat room. Please tell us where you're connecting from, and then specifically the Q&A for questions of which we'll attend to by the end of our speaker's presentation. In the meantime, let's wait for some few members to join in, and then I'll continue with our bio speaker. Okay, we have Natasha from Centurion, Unita from Eastern Cape. Anyone else? Obriel, Northwest, Mafikeng. Resego Tebe from Northwest University. Okay, guys, let's dive right into our speaker's bio. She's a personal branding facilitator, branding and marketing you. She's a seasoned professional who is passionate about entrepreneurship, empowering people, growing leaders, and helping people identify and operate in their strength. She believes that leadership of self, others, and organization is the answer to all of the challenges and opportunities in the world today. She is the founder of Chief People Officer. She's the founder and Chief People Officer of Adore and Hair Beauty, a one-stop for Black women girls' natural care hair needs. The vision for her business is to help Black women and girls understand, embrace, and maximize their hair, empower women and girls to create their own standard of beauty. She has lived in South Africa since the year 2011 and has been a regular contributor on hair care for the nationally distributed and recognized Destiny magazine since 2012. She was also a contributor for the Shimmer by Motion's hair care magazine from May until December 2012. She has been featured sharing hair care tips and techniques on the Ready Clubby show, Channel 702, SABC's One, the Link TV show, the Citizen newspaper, and Dineo Ranaka's reality show. She was a proud member of the Healthy Hair Gurus, a group of bloggers and writers who were devoted to sharing healthy hair tips with women, regardless of how they wear their hair, natural or relaxed. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in marketing from the University of Alabama, an MBA from the Harvard Business School. Prior to moving to South Africa, she worked in a human capital consulting for 8 hours with Deloitte Counseling. She spent 3 years working in leadership and performance management at Fulton County Schools as part of the broad residency in urban education fellowship. After moving to South Africa, she began working as a professional development manager for the Johannesburg office of McKinsey & Company. One of the roles was to serve as the program manager for the McKinsey Leadership Program. In this role, she conducted leadership trainings and coached 7 cohorts of young leaders on topics of performance, vision, branding, purpose, and career pathways. Outside of her passion for entrepreneurship empowerment, and leadership. She is a lover of spiritual books, traveling, spas, and chocolate and laughter. She also has a book called Intelligence Isn't It Enough? It guides readers on how to survive and thrive in corporate spaces, how to take a more strategic approach to their career, and how to understand themselves and deeply. Hi guys, you should buy it. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Carice Anderson as I hand over to her.
Thank you so much, Ria, for that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. As Ria has said, my name is Carice Anderson, and I have recently released a book here in South Africa. I am in South Africa. I've been living here full time for the last, it'll be 10 years in October. I'm based out of Johannesburg. And as Ria has mentioned, I have recently released a book called Intelligence Isn't Enough, a Black Professional's Guide to Thriving in the Workplace. It was released at the end of January. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is connecting the themes from the session today to some of the themes that are in my book. So I just wanted to say good afternoon to everybody and thank you so much for joining me. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. All right, I hope everyone can see this. So Ria has talked a little bit about my bio, but I'll mention a few things that maybe weren't in there. I have spent, time as a consultant. That's where I've spent a lot of my career. I'm currently working at a company called Korn Ferry. I'm a senior principal there, and I do a lot of work in the leadership development, diversity and inclusion. I do a lot of one-on-one coaching as well. As Ria mentioned, I worked at McKinsey, I worked at Deloitte. I also worked at a business accelerator here in Johannesburg called Seed Academy. And when I was doing some independent contractor work, I worked for companies like Bain & Company, Google, and Alan Gray Orbis Foundation. And in terms of what my real passion is, it is to unlock individuals to reach their fullest potential so they can have more impact and more fun at work. As Ria has mentioned, this is the cover of my book, and people always ask me, where can we find your books? So I thought I'd go ahead and put it in here up front. So I'm in all the good bookstores in South Africa. So Exclusive, CNA, Bargain, Bridge, Take-A-Lot, Loot. My book is also available in the US. If you all have friends and family in the US, please tell them to grab a copy. They can get it on Amazon or at Target. And I'm also available in all the good bookstores in the UK as well. These are just a couple of the photos that, speak to where my book has been available and how it's been ranked in different stores and on different lists. So I feel like the book has done really well. It's only been out, like I said, about 3.5 months, but I think it's done really, really well. I still got more work to do in terms of reaching more people, but this just gives you a sense of what the start of the book has been. So in terms of today's session, I really want to cover 3 points with you all. I want to cover the power of your story, and how does that connect to you being a high quality, effective leader who's able to not just build followership, but also build other leaders. Number 2, what are some keys to self-awareness? And I'm going to tie that back to the 4 themes for today. And then I'm going to talk about authenticity. So authenticity ties in quite nicely. I like to use that word in lieu of the word genuineness, because that's a word that I use in my book, is authenticity. So I'm going to talk about a concept that I share in my book that closely relates to that. So in terms of what you'll get out of today, I think number 1, you're going to know why your story and working on yourself is key to being an exceptional leader. I know a lot of times when people talk about leadership, we talk about, oh, how do you coach other people? How do you delegate? But to be an exceptional leader, you have to start with yourself. And so we're going to talk about why that's important. Then I'm going to share with you all 8 areas to really reflect on to build your self-awareness and your self-worth. And then lastly, I'm going to talk to you about how do we think about flexing on our authenticity? How do we not look at authenticity as being one thing or the other, but that it is kind of a range of things. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So in terms of, when I was writing my book, or when I was kind of reflecting on it, I started thinking about what are the things that we need to have impact versus what do we think we need versus what do we actually need. And so that first table is, I think, what we think we need, right? We think we need to have the degrees and qualifications, which is what you all are working towards. We think we need technical skills, and we think we need hard work, and that's it. But after working for quite some time, I realized that those three components probably comprise 25% of what it takes to be successful. The other 75% is about knowing ourselves, knowing other people, and knowing the environments in which we work. And also, as part of my book, I had these reflections from my own experiences from running the leadership development program at McKinsey. I also interviewed about 30 successful Black leaders who have worked, lived, and been educated in Africa, the US, and Europe. And these are all individuals that I respect, that I admire. And so they're also quoted throughout my book. And I'm going to share actually some quotes from some of those individuals during the course of the session today. And so when I think about what is the framework for my book, it really comes down to you need to integrate the knowledge of yourself, the knowledge of others, the knowledge of your environment. You bring those three together, and then you develop a personal brand and a communication style that allows you to have maximum impact. And this is along with your hard work, your technical skills. But I honestly think the combination of these three, this framework, is what's really going to take your career to the next level. Because I know a lot of people who are super smart, very high IQ, have all the letters, degrees, and certifications in the world, and they're stuck from an advancement standpoint and from a leadership standpoint because they have not mastered these three areas. So, and the focus of my conversation with you all today is going to be on the knowing self part. I'm not going to focus on the knowing others or the knowing your environment. It is all about understanding ourselves. And so, one quote that I share in my book is that the type of leader you will become starts with who you are right now, not who you become tomorrow or next year, but who you are right now. The awareness that you develop, the concepts you focus on, and the strategies you employ early on in your career. And I love this quote that I saw on LinkedIn from this lady named Tara J. Frank. She said, the best way to be a better leader is to be a better person. And that's why we're going to focus a lot on self today, as opposed to, looking at others. We're going to look internally first, because that's where I believe it actually starts. So these are the 4 themes today. So I thought it was important. I was like, let's all get on the same page about what these words actually mean. So if we look at integrity, the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, the state of being whole and undivided. Genuineness, the quality of truly being what something is said to be. And I like to use the word authenticity. So I'll use that word instead of genuineness. Humility, the quality of having a modest or low view of one's importance. I'm not a big fan of the word humility necessarily. I would rather use another word, which I'll share with you all in a second. And then empathy, which is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Okay, so these are the 4 things. So I want to just quickly, there's a book that I read several years ago called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And the whole premise of the book is that it's a story about a CEO who starts at a company that she's now running, and she's inherited this executive team. And so she's trying to figure out this team and how to make this team effective. And so the basic premise of this book is that trust is the first step to building an effective team. If your team does not trust you, you're not going to be able to reach these other 4 levels, right? So then the idea is, if trust is the first building block, and we know that trust is the first building block regardless of the relationship, right? Whether it's personal, whether it's professional, whether it's, a business that you're working with, trust is always number 1, right? So you have to ask yourself, how do I build trust? What does it even mean to be somebody who is a trustworthy person? So I quote, this is a quote from my book. I actually quote a professor of mine from Harvard Business School. She says that trust is made up of 3 components. Number 1, logic. So are you competent? Are you good at what you do? Are you technically skilled? Number 2, authenticity. Are you real? Genuine person. And number 3 is empathy. Do you care about me? So if we tie those kind of back to those 4 themes, right? The 4 themes are integrity, authenticity, humility, and empathy, right? You've got 2 out of those 3 on this list already. And you got to remember, if you're missing one of these, people are not going to trust you. And thus, it's going to be really hard for you to move to those other building blocks and to have a successful team or effective relationship with another person. So when I look at these 4 words, I was kind of reflecting on this as I was preparing this presentation, as I thought, the one word that really sums these 4 up for me is self-awareness. So if you look at the word integrity, it's, saying the state of being whole and undivided. If you don't know who you are, if you're not clear about what your values are, it's going to be really hard for you to be honest. It's going to be hard for you to have a strong set of moral principles. So you have to be very clear about who you are, what matters to you, what you value, what are your boundaries, right? And that comes from knowing who you are. The same thing with authenticity, right? The quality of truly being what something is said to be, being authentic. If you don't know who you are, it's very hard for you to be authentic. It's very hard for you to be real and genuine, right? Because you're changing up who you are depending on who you're with, or what circumstances you're in, or what situation or context you're in, right? Humility, that's not a word I feel that great about, but self-awareness is a word that I would put in place of humility, actually, because self-awareness is all about having a balanced view of yourself. So not thinking that you bring everything to the table, but knowing that there are some things that you absolutely bring, and being confident in what it is that you bring to the table. And then that last one, empathy. So it's going to be very hard for you to understand and share the feelings of another if you don't even understand your own feelings. It's really hard if you haven't worked through some of your own issues and trauma for you to be able to be empathetic for other people, because you're too caught up in your own trauma. And to be empathetic is to, connect with someone on that level, right? And if you haven't dealt with your own trauma and some of your own pain, it's going to be difficult for you to connect with other people on theirs. So the word I'm really going to be focusing on today is self-awareness, because I think it encompasses all 4 of these. One other thing I will say too is, self-awareness is the ability to reflect on how other people experience you. It's one thing for us to say, well, this was my intention, but what is the impact? Self-awareness is about coming across in a consistent, balanced manner that builds trust, that word we were just talking about, right? Because if I'm consistent, if people know what to expect from me, if I'm not up one day and down the next and being all kinds of different people, right? It's hard for people to know, like, what can I expect from Carice? She's so different depending on the situation, right? Self-awareness is about valuing what you bring to the table, but also understanding your areas for development and recognizing and valuing the talents and skills that others bring that you don't. That's what helps you to be, maybe a little bit more humble, is to realize I don't bring everything. I don't know everything, right? And so when you are, and like I mentioned that last point, when you're aware of your own pain and you're able to connect with it, then you can have empathy for others. So I hope you all can see how self-awareness is kind of the linchpin with all of these 4 words and where I'll be focusing on today. So, if you want to be empathetic, you have to start by healing your own personal wounds and being compassionate towards yourself. Because if you can't be compassionate towards yourself, if you're so hard on yourself, you beat yourself up all the time, every time you make a mistake, you talk very negatively to yourself, how can you be able to express compassion to other people if you can't even express it to yourself? So if you want to be whole, if you want to be authentic, and you want to have self-awareness in order to build trust, you have to be rooted in who you are. And to be rooted in who you are, you have to know and embrace your story. So that's why we're going to talk about the power of your story, right? So which is that first bullet point here. So when you think about, and when I say your story, you all have a story. I know you're young and you still have a lot more of your life to live, but you've lived a good amount of your life up to this point. And you've lived what a lot of us would call those foundational formative years of your life, where you have really formed your character, you formed your values, you've grown up in a particular culture, you have a particular perspective about life and the world and other people, right? So you have a story. So it's about really looking at that story And I'm talking about the story from your birth. You know, what kind of circumstances were you born in? What kind of relationship did your parents have? You know, what type of environment did you really grow up in? What were some of the messages that people gave you or told you? And how have you kind of assumed and now believe those messages as your own, right? So that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying your story. Who are the people and the situations that have shaped you for good or for bad into who you are today? So that's what I mean when I talk about your story, is really understanding who you are. And I think, you know, if you look across the world, we have a lot of leaders across multiple sectors that are using their power and authority to act out their unhealed trauma, their bitterness, their narcissism, and their entitlement. And we as the people, we suffer for it. So this is why it's very important for you to understand, you know, what are some of your own personal needs and fears, because once we get into positions of power and authority, we just act out based on those needs and fears. So one of the things I say in my book is that embrace your story, because that is what sets you apart from everyone else. Your story is your competitive advantage. That is the thing that will help differentiate you, because your story is what shapes your perspective, and your perspective was what you bring into a work environment, or into, you know, whatever leadership positions that you end up assuming, right? Excuse me. Your story is also the source of your greatest pain, your purpose, and ultimately power. So I know that there might be parts of your story that you're not so psyched about, right? Maybe there's some hurt, some pain, but that trauma helps you connect with other people. It helps give you empathy. It helps give you compassion. And it helps even to help you determine, what is your purpose? What is your purpose? How do I want to take what I've been through and turn it around and help someone else? And so I talk in here about, you know, where did my career begin, but it's less about where my career began, and it's more about where did my story begin. And so this is a picture of me in the hospital right after I was born. And this is why I was saying to you all to think about from the very, very beginning. And so here are just a few lessons when I reflected on my own story. So I grew up in an environment where everything was about grades. Everything was about getting degrees and qualifications. Everything was about your intellect. And so I was a child in my family who always did really well in school. I got the best grades between, you know, my siblings and me. I had a full tuition scholarship to university. And so because of this, a lot of my identity and my self-worth was wrapped up in achievement. So if I was doing well, if I was achieving, I was on a high. If I wasn't doing well, I was depressed. I was questioning my identity and what value I brought to the earth if I wasn't the top of the class or near the top of the class. I would say another kind of offshoot of this focus on intellect is that I was not taught about the importance of relationships. I thought all I really needed was my brain and my degrees. And I wasn't taught to think about the impact that I was having on other people, or that other people were having on me. And how those factors, how that, you know, how we were experiencing each other could ultimately impact that work product that I cared so much about. So I put all the value on intellect and none on the softer skills like relationship building or communication. I had an inflated view of what I brought to the table and a less valued view if you didn't bring what it is that I bring to the table. So that goes back to that self-awareness element, right? So we have to know, yes, there are some things that I'm great at, that I'm really strong in, but there are also things that I'm not so strong in, and I need to create space so other people can bring those things, right? I'll say two more things, and then I'll move on, right? So I thought that if I was saying and doing the right things, that I could fool people into believing that I respected them. All the while, people could tell when I was being inauthentic, kind of going back to what we were talking about, authenticity, even if they never said a thing, right? And so people experienced me as inauthentic because I wasn't saying what I really thought. I thought I was fooling people, you know, by being professional and saying the right things, right? But I was coming across inauthentic to folks. And one last thing I'll say is I grew up in a household where we had quite lively disagreements, you know, and I never learned that you could have a calm disagreement. So I thought the only choices were rage or complete silence. And I took that mindset into work, and it did not serve me well. Because what I ended up doing was I would have conflict with people and I wouldn't know how to address it. And then I would just kind of explode, right? And that's not constructive. That's not how you build, relationships. That's not how you build trust. So, I encourage you all to think about, what is your story? Even taking it as far back as, what's your parents' story? How did they come together to create you? And what was the circumstances under which you were born? Was it a happy occasion? Was there, upset in the family or anger in the family about it? So, because you marinated in that, right? In that upset. So thinking about all of that, who are the people, the places, the situations that have shaped you into who you are today? And how are those people and situations still affecting you to this day? Right? Because if you think about, there are people in the past that trigger you, you're going to run into those kinds of people in your career, because the universe is like, you got to learn how to deal with this until you really heal this part of yourself. So it's so important for you all to understand what your story is. So I just want to talk about the second topic, which is the continuum of authenticity. So, and I've coached a lot of young people. And one of the things that I often hear young people talk about is, well, I'm not a fake person, and I'm either going to be 100% real or I'm 100% fake, And I want to offer to you all that I do believe that there is a continuum of authenticity. And let's say that you can have levels of authenticity from 1 to 10. So let's say that 10 is when I am with my closest family and friends, and I have no filter. I'm probably loud, I'm cracking jokes, I'm sarcastic, that's me on level 10. So the idea is that if my family were, and let's say at work, I'm a level 6, okay? I kind of tone things down a little bit. The idea is that if my family came to see me at work, would they recognize me? Would they say, okay, that looks like Carice, she's still, cracking jokes, having a little fun. Maybe she's a little bit more toned down than she would be with us, but I still recognize her. And also vice versa. If the people from work were to come and see you with your closest friends and family, would they recognize you? They might say, okay, Carrie, she's a little louder. She's cracking a few more jokes than normal, okay, but I still see her in there, right? And that for me is that continuum. And you have to decide, what is your kind of breaking point? Where is the level at which you will not go past? Right? So let's say you work for a company that needs you to be a level 2, and you're like, no, I won't go past the level 6. Then you have to think about, is this a company I want to continue working for? I think, so I want you all to recognize, depending on the context, the audience, the message that you're trying to get across, you can flex. You don't have to just be one thing or the other, because on a job interview, I'm probably a level 4 authentic. I'm very toned down because those people don't know me. And so I want to be effective. I don't want to just say what it is I want to say. I want to get my message across. I want to be able to let them know that I'm the very best person for this job. And so I might tone myself down, my sarcasm, my jokes, my loudness, right? Because I want them to focus on my skill set and what I bring to this particular job. So I hope that's helpful for you all to think about authenticity, that it is not one thing or the other, but you also don't want to be two completely different people. That takes too much energy and it's not sustainable. So you want to think about, how can I play on this spectrum? How can I be some version of myself and still be authentic? So now I just want to reflect on these 8 self-awareness keys. And some of these will go back to what I've been talking about before, right? So number 1, reflect on your story. I think I've already really talked about that, okay? Heal your past trauma. We all have things that have happened to us. Nobody has had a perfect childhood, because there are no perfect parents and there are no perfect people. So some of us have, more severe trauma than others, but we need to really examine, what is that past trauma? What has happened to us that makes us react in a certain way or show up in a certain way or think certain things about ourselves? It's really important to do that. Understanding your emotional triggers. I think if you reflect on your story, think about your trauma, that's going to help you understand what your emotional triggers are. What are those things that make you act outside of your character? What angers you? As I mentioned earlier, a lot of my self-worth was based on achievement. So I would be triggered when people questioned my intelligence. And I had to check myself and say, okay, Carice, what's that about? You know, that's from my childhood. That's from growing up as being labeled as the smart one and just attaching a lot of my self-worth and my value to that. But I had to tell myself, if I never achieve another thing, I still have worth and value because I take up space on the earth, full stop. I don't have to get another degree. I don't need to get another brand on my CV. I am valuable. I am worthy just because I take up space on the planet. This next one is know your internal net worth. Normally when we talk about net worth in the kind of in a financial sense, we talk about your assets, those things that you own that have value minus your liabilities. Okay, so you know, whether you got credit card debt or you know, bank loan that you owe, right? That's a liability. So in this term, I'm talking about when we strip away all of our titles, our degrees, our labels, you know, oh, I'm a husband, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a father, I'm a sister, I'm a brother. When we strip away all that stuff, who are we? What value do we have? Because that is what we need to get down to, and that's what we need to be acting from. We need to be acting from a place of knowing our worth just as individuals. Because a lot of these things that we place value in, they could be gone tomorrow. I'm married. My husband's name is Fungai. Love him to death. We've been married for almost 11 years. But if he left me tomorrow and my whole identity was wrapped up in calling myself Fungai's wife, who am I if he were to leave me tomorrow? So we need to be rooting our value in things that cannot be taken away from us, but just in who we are as people. Uncovering your strengths and areas of development. This is a great way for you to build confidence and to, like I was saying earlier, build that self-awareness, build that balanced view of yourself, you know, to know like, hey, I'm really strong in certain things and I have confidence in what I bring to the table, but I know I don't bring everything because I've got some development areas. And that keeps you from being arrogant. Because I know a lot of us worry about, oh, I don't want to be arrogant. No. Arrogance is when you think you bring everything and you don't need anything from anyone else. Confidence is when you say, I'm strong in these things, but I know I don't bring everything. So let me create the space for other people to bring things to the table that I don't have. Reprogramming your self-talk. So if I were to, you know, your self-talk is that internal dialogue. What are you saying to yourself all day, every day? You know, if I were to record what you say to yourself all day, every day, this is your internal dialogue. It's not necessarily what you say out loud, but just what you're saying in here to yourself. What is it that I would hear? Would I hear negativity? Would I hear unrelenting criticism? Or would I hear positivity and encouragement? So I think it's about, and I'll talk in a second about how you can manage this, right? But thinking about what am I saying to myself? Am I tearing myself down all the time? Because you spend more time with you than anyone else. So you got to think about, you know, what am I saying to myself? Am I encouraging? Am I building myself up or am I tearing myself down? Then the next one is practicing empathy. So this is all about getting outside of yourself. Even if it's a school project you're working on, you might be mad at somebody you're working on something with, they're not holding their weight. You might ask yourself, what's this person going through? What is it that I don't know about this person's experience that might be impacting their ability to contribute to this project? What is it that they're dealing with that maybe I'm not aware of? So I think it's to just approach people in situations with a spirit of inquiry, as opposed to advocacy and acting like you know everything already. And putting yourself in that person's shoes to say, you know, what if I was struggling with that? How would that affect me? And thinking about how can I help this person? And then I'll say this last one is just developing a bigger purpose. Because I think, you know, when I look at a lot of leaders around the world, you know, people's purpose was to solely benefit themselves and maybe their inner circle. But develop a purpose that is bigger than yourself and the people around you. Develop a purpose that is, you know, great for South Africa or the continent as a whole or the world, right? Do something that is bigger than just yourself and those people that are around you. Because what it is, you know, great leaders that are secure in themselves serve greater purposes that serve people outside of themselves and those in their inner circle. When we have small-minded leaders, we have selfish leaders, They only have a purpose that's for themselves and not everyone else or other people outside of themselves in their inner circle. So developing that bigger purpose, I feel like that's a sign of somebody who's self-aware, somebody who's healed their traumas, is that you're not just thinking about yourself. So I told you kind of some things in terms of what you need to do. Now I want to talk about how you can do them. So that first one is map out your life story. You could do this today, ladies and gentlemen. You could pull out a piece of paper. It doesn't have to, you don't have to write your autobiography. I'm talking about bullet points. It's like, okay, my parents got divorced when I was 5. I moved to a different school when I was 7. This happened to me when I was 15. Think about just the very important formative experiences and people in your life, okay, that have shaped you into who you are today. Then the second point is there's this free test that you can take. It's called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Test. This is the link for it. Once maybe I stop sharing, I'll put it in the chat. But this is a free test that you can take to understand what are some of the traumatic experiences that have happened to you that might be affecting you now. Okay, because like I said, we gotta heal that trauma. We gotta heal those childhood wounds. They affect us now if we don't deal with them, right? The third one is ask your family, friends, professors, classmates, what your strengths and areas of development are. Okay, that's a free exercise. You can just ask somebody really casually, hey, what do you think I'm good at? What do you think comes naturally to me, right? And that will help you start to develop your understanding of your strengths and your areas of development, which is building that balanced view of yourself. The next, so when you get into that spiral, you make a mistake and you start beating up on yourself, you need to tell yourself just to be quiet. Literally, you might have to say it out loud. I need you to be quiet, Carice. To pause, right? And to think about, to start to express some compassion towards yourself. Like, yeah, we made a mistake, but we can fix it. We made a mistake, but we didn't know any better at the time. You know, we made a mistake, we're human. Okay? So giving yourself some of that, practice some of that compassion with yourself is really important. And then that last one is just reflecting on the types of people and the situations that trigger you. And what are some of those root causes? You know, so what is it about a certain person that just gets under your skin and annoys you? And why is that? What is it that that person is triggering in you? I know for me personally, I'm a really values-driven person. So when people are not values-driven, they're not respectful towards people, it really irritates me. And a lot of that just goes back to my upbringing. I was just brought up in a very Christian home where you were taught to treat people with respect, no matter who they are, what they do. And it really grates my nerves when people don't do that. So I think, you know, you figuring out what are your triggers, like mine, like I mentioned a second ago, if somebody questioned my intelligence, that was a trigger for me. So you got to reflect on why. And that's because I put a lot of my self-worth, my self-value in achievement. And if people were questioning that achievement or that intellect, I would be offended. Okay. So just spend some time looking at you. Don't look out here because the hardest person you will ever have to lead is yourself. It's not everybody else, it's you. So focusing on you is a great way to put you on that path of being a really fantastic leader. So I just want to leave you all with a quote as I wrap up. So as I mentioned before, I interviewed about 30 leaders who I really respect and admire, and their quotes are sprinkled throughout my book. And one of them that I interviewed is a lady named Rachel Adams. So Rachel is a former colleague of mine. We worked together at McKinsey. She's done a lot of work in the leadership development space, and she's now a full-time coach. And I feel like her quote really sums up nicely why this self-work, understanding ourselves, is so important for us if we want to be leaders. So I'm going to read this quote. So a leader who has not worked out their self-worth is dangerous to society. They put on a mask of excessive confidence when beneath the surface, they are deeply insecure. They see everyone as a threat. They see everything as being in their way. Put together a collective of such leaders who have not worked out their self-worth, and you have set up a society for failure and irreparable damage. These kinds of leaders create a system in which it is impossible for followers to emerge in their own self-worth. The leader's greatest work is not to point out what is wrong in the world and how only they can fix it. It is to fix themselves. we all suffer when leaders do not do their greatest work. The greatest work is internal. So I just wanted to remind you all just the 3 points that we talked about today: the power of your story, the continuum of authenticity, and those 8 self-awareness keys. And in terms of what you hopefully have gotten out of today is why knowing your story and working on yourself is key to being an exceptional leader. 8 areas to reflect on to build your self-awareness and self-worth, and our understanding of an ability of how we can flex on our authenticity. And that is it from me. I will stop sharing and we can do Q&A.
Thank you very much, Carice, for such an informative and inspiring. When I grow up, I want to be like you. Yeah. So, and then I got this quote, okay, which is my favorite from you. It says, the type of leader you will become starts with who you are, right? The awareness that you develop and the content you focus and then the strategies. That one is my favorite because I believe like charity begins at home. Like it starts with you. It's possible to respect yourself. It's impossible. Okay, it's impossible to respect someone if you don't respect yourself. So you might as well just respect yourself, and then you can respect others. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let's dive right into the Q&A. We've got one question from Karabo Lepele. She or he says, what advice would you give for building trust with your team?
Well, I mean, you know, if you look at those 3 elements, right? It's logic, authenticity, empathy. So logic, you need to be really good at what you do. Do what you say you're going to do. Be consistent, be reliable, be dependable. You know, that's number 1. Number 2 is be empathetic, care about other people, because people can sense when everything is about you. So you want to actually actively think about other people, put yourself in the shoes of other people, ask them how they're doing, what's going on with them, be supportive, offer, you know, guidance or assistance or a helping hand, right? And then I think authenticity is just the being real part, being vulnerable, you know, asking for help, saying when you don't know something. I think those are kind of the keys, right, to building that trust with people. And it's really important because, like I said, if you don't have trust, it's going to ultimately impact the quality of whatever it is you're trying to do. So that's the first step. And when you have that trust, people will be open with you. They'll communicate with you. You can communicate with them. You can talk about the problems that you're having. It just opens everything up. But when you don't have trust, it's a recipe for disaster. I hope that answers your question.
Carice, may I ask a / comment? I so enjoyed how you broke this whole topic open for us. I've just relished myself into your presentation. Thank you so much. And I love the fact that you took integrity, empathy, genuineness, and humility, and you put them into self-awareness. Because I think what happens mostly is it emanates from us if we have a certain level of self-awareness, and people pick up on that, and then they automatically seem to trust you when they know that you are grounded.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's so true. It's very true.
Another thing that I wanted to share with you is I think what you've brought into my mind today is that I think self-awareness is an indirect form of self-preservation. Because if we take the courage to deal with the trauma and the pain, indirectly it sets us up for a positive outcome. So it benefits both us and the people that we lead.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the thing is, if we don't deal with that trauma, it just comes up and we're not able to really manage it.
Absolutely.
And leverage it in a really we don't want to address that trauma because it's so painful. But I think if you think about, and I agree with you, right? It is painful to address some of these things that have happened to us, but if we don't address them, they continue to have power and control over us. You know what I mean? And we're never able to really stand in our full power because we're allowing these things from the past or these people from the past to control us now.
I agree. Thank you very much. Over to you, Ria Leboga. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Carice.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's it. We only had one question. Let me check on the chat room. There's nothing. That's it.
I just wanted to ask a question too. I see a couple comments in the chat, but is this making sense to people? Because I know, you're thinking, oh, we're going to come in here and talk about these 4 different areas, but I've kind of rolled it into one. Is it making sense? I would love to see, if it is making sense to people, I would love to see a yes in the chat.
Yeah, it is.
Good.
Carice, I just want to add the recording of your session will be available on the Golden Key International Honor Society YouTube channel. So people will be able to access it again.
Oh, fantastic. Yes, I have the link here. I've just put the ACE test link in the, and they have, I think if you Google ACE test, they also share all kinds of resources. Once you recognize, okay, I have experienced a lot of trauma in my life, how do I start to go about addressing it? There are resources for you as well. There's actually a book that Oprah has co-written with I think he's a psychiatrist or a psychologist, called What Happened to You? Because a lot of time, yeah, it's called What Happened to You. It's actually for sale here in South Africa. And the premise of the book is, a lot of times we see people who act out and who, are behaving badly. And we're like, what's wrong with you? But she's saying the question we need to be asking is, what happened to you that has made you, have you had to deal with that's making you act out? And I think too.
Yeah.
What has happened to me that's making me behave this way?
Yeah. And guys, please do check Carice's book. It's called Intelligence Isn't It Enough? I'm definitely gonna buy myself one.
Yes, please go grab a copy.
Yes.
If you're someone that is first generation working in a corporate space, or there's so many things in the book that I share that I wish someone had shared with me when I started working. So I highly recommend you go get a copy. I can save you a lot of pain, a lot of frustration, because I try to help you all figure out how these spaces work.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. And thank you, Carice, for such an informative session.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Thank you all for having me. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Carice.
Bye, everyone.